Is the Bhagavad Gita still relevant at a time like ours when there are so many debates about equality of genders? How can we get past the idea of men and women when we read the Gita?
Woman is also a label. And there is a concept that we bring gender also, and that has probably been one of the reasons why there is so much around, what should I say, what is a woman's role, or there is even discussions and debates whether Gita looks at women as intellectually inferior, or thinks of women's role in a very constrained way.
Vani Kola is an Indian venture capitalist. She is the founder and managing director of Kalari Capital, an Indian venture capital firm. She was listed as one of the most powerful women in Indian business by Fortune India in 2014. Vani Kola was born in 1964 in Hyderabad, Andhra Pradesh, in India. She studied engineering and was one of the only 6 girls among 400 engineering students. She left to pursue her studies in the United States.
There is a interpretation we bring to anything that is timeless by limitations of our current time and thinking. And the reason these things become timeless, like Gita, is because there is a core of truth, and that's really why they become timeless.
In the end, what is the dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna all about? How can we interpret the battle of Mahabharata, and how does that interpretation concern every one of us?
So when you look at all this and you realize the depth of what's going on behind, it's like a classic mythology story with gods and goddesses, with heroes and heroines and all that stuff. And what happens in the Gita part of it is the focus is on Lord Krishna trying to tell Arjuna how to live his life, not just on this battlefield, but in all the battlefields of our existence.
Dr. Elizabeth Denley is the editor of the Heartfulness magazine. She is a meditation trainer and a curriculum developer. She is an experienced writer and editor with a sound history of working in the publishing industry. She is a certified facilitator and heartfulness trainer and is known for her entrepreneurship, conflict resolution, and communication skills.
And so that means that courage and strength are required. Where did that come from? It came as much from the feminine side, from the loving side of things, as it did from the so-called words of wisdom. Because what was transmitted on the battlefield was far more important than the words. You have to look behind the words, behind what's happening, and then you appreciate the importance of the feminine. So even though at age 15, I didn't get it at all, I just thought, not very interesting for me. Growing up in the feminist generation in Australia in that era in the 70s and thinking this is just all male patriarchy. But of course, there's much more depth to it than that. And for me as a woman, I also have to work on my own internal struggles. I also have to overcome my hesitancy at doing things that are really difficult to do sometimes. And I think for women especially, this thing of having to be strong and maybe not please others, not appease others, not do what your relatives want, etc., is a really vital lesson. Not that we want to be rebellious and go against them, but we need to have discernment about what's right and wrong. How do I become authentic? How do I learn to just be who I am in any situation, irrespective of the culture and the family I grew up in? That's a really tricky thing, and that's what also the Gita is all about.
What does the Bhagavad Gita teach you in this regard?
Be yourself, be your authentic self, and you don't have to explain that so much. And You can, but you have to be thoughtful on what is that is your authentic self. What it is to me may not be for you, and that should be perfectly okay. And try to sort of truly deeply be aware from your own judgment to who you want to be versus somebody else's judgment to it. And I think it's individual responsibility to not deny yourself your path. That could be whatever that path is. Maybe you're pursuing, intensely a passion in music or this or that, or, math or whatever that may be.
What if I lack direction or am overwhelmed by circumstances? How do I overcome that?
You can only do two things. You have to have the wisdom to accept what you can't change and yet have the courage to live your life. And you have to have the courage to change the things that you can change. So it may be that I have a conversation with you, and it's also a form of courage to be open and vulnerable, to have the conversation when I see that there is an unconscious bias, to say, explain my point of view. Now, you may accept or not. The more we each do that and we bring an energy of listening and tolerance, I think we allow each person to be what they are. I don't have to be defined by someone else, and I should not be defining someone else what they should be or not, right? So that acceptance and tolerance is really, I think, what we need to grow for different ways of life. We talk about this. The nature is full of things. The beautiful rose, and maybe a nightingale that sings beautifully, but may or may not have the nice feathers of a parakeet. Doesn't actually look that colorful and hence that interesting. So nature gives us so much diversity, and we embrace it. But we try for homogeneity within human existence, and I fundamentally believe that's not what nature intended.
Is the lesser apparent aspect of the feminine in classical texts something seen often? How can we try to understand what is beyond it instead of debating about it?
Well, this has been really, in a way, an issue in every culture throughout human history. For example, even in the Rig Veda, we have nearly 1,000 rishis, but only about a dozen rishikas, female rishis. Krishna specifically refers to certain, what he calls feminine qualities, including compassion and including wisdom. This is actually a fairly common idea in a way.
Ravi Ravindra has been the guide of the Gurdjieff Foundation of India since its inception in 2003. After his studies from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, he received a Master of Science and a PhD in Physics from the University of Toronto. He is now Professor Emeritus at Dalhousie University, Canada, from where he retired as Chair of Comparative Religion and Adjunct Professor of Physics.
But on the other hand, increasingly, there is an understanding. I don't think it's very much emphasized in the Bhagavad Gita. On the other hand, it's not excluded. Krishna is not excluding anybody, men or women, but increasingly the notion that what is actually required, what traditionally would have been called both masculine and feminine tendencies. Masculine being more activity oriented, feminine being more receptivity oriented. This is why even Shiva, who is the Lord of Yoga, has one of this great portrait is Ardha Narishwar, half man, half woman, portrait of Shiva. And we have a very great Upanishad, Shvetashvatara Upanishad, this is named after the sage Shvetashvatara, who actually makes this remark that all human realization is a combination of tapas prabhav and deva prasad. Dev Prasad meaning how do I receive something? That is usually called feminine in traditions. and how do I actively search in something that is traditionally called masculine. So the suggestion from Shweta Shutar is that I need a combination of the two, both male and female. And we have many other incidents. If you're interested, I tell you a story about our great poet Meera. I mentioned this actually in my book on the Yoga Sutras. One yogi had come, this was a common practice, that they will come and stay outside the town and people will come and visit them and learn from them, etc. So Meera also wanted to visit this yogi, and the yogi said, no, he's not allowed to be in company of any females. Meera sent a word to him saying, oh, yogi, I would have thought in the presence of Krishna, we are all females. What does that mean? That we are all receiving, not actively doing something, receiving something, submitting ourselves to it. So the yogi was so touched by Meera's remark that he came running and became her pupil.
Going beyond the feminine and masculine qualities, the fact that the advice from Lord Krishna is beyond the problems of gender, understanding that we can all develop authenticity and tolerance, we can finally see how Lord Krishna in the last chapter takes us, the reader, to understand the ultimate quality of the seeker, the devotee.
So, we spoke about how does somebody who's a woman or with a feminine approach to this tackle the fact that, this is a war zone, this is a guy's area, this is an area where they're, talking about killing each other. But, when you get to this last part of the Bhagavad Gita and you're really looking at the divine consciousness, of course, this is the feminine realm. This is the realm of emergence. And of course, this is where, from a feminine perspective, we excel in a way, because every girl child is born with this capability innate, because she's going to become a mother. She's automatically designed for this. And then finally, the very last chapter is what's known as the yoga of liberation and renunciation. And here we get to the crux of what I think as a woman matters for me most in the Bhagavad Gita. Because here we really focus on surrender and what surrender means in the yogic sense. Not, if you look surrender up in an English dictionary, in the Oxford Dictionary, it doesn't have a very appealing meaning. It means to have to give in or to hand something over to. And it's often like, surrendering in a war. It's often a forced thing, not very exciting. Whereas Saranagati, the yogic concept of surrender, is just beautiful. It's like, being able to, being held, being supported, not having to have that burden of responsibility of dharma. And this comes back to the fruitless action thing. You have your duty, but you're not burdened by your duty, because it's a joyous thing. You're carefree, you're free. You don't have the responsibility in that individual sense of I am responsible, because everything is given to the Lord. So it's a very, very joyous, very different feeling. And that's really how the Gita ends. I just wanted to share one sloka, and this is from chapter 6, sloka 30. The person who sees me in everything and everything within me will never be lost to me, nor will I ever be lost to them. A person who is rooted in oneness realizes that I am in every being. Wherever they go, they remain in me. When they see all beings as equal in suffering or in joy, because they are like themselves, that person has grown perfect in yoga.
What does surrender mean to you? Share your story with us using the palette board created for this.